All right. Keep it going. We still got 2 minutes. Okay. Welcome to Psalm 34. That melody that you were just listening to, composed by Baruch Hyatt, is a goosebump for me melody. And I shared in my letter of introduction that we once had the great privilege of having Elie Wiesel at our synagogue, dedicating our synagogue, and our then executive director, who played a wonderful accordion, he chose that as the welcome. The words for that song are taken from verses 13 to 15 this morning. Who is the person that desires life, who loves days to see goodness? Guard your tongue from evil and your lips from speaking deceit. Turn from evil and do good. Seek peace and pursue it. That teaching is at the center, literally the center of this psalm. This is another acrostic, another one of those alphabetical organized psalms like we saw with Psalm 25, which had words that resonated with the golden calf story. This is the second one of those acrostics. And here, remarkably, there's a letter missing, just like there were a couple letters missing in Psalm 25. In this case, in the Aleph Bet, the ABCs, the letter Vav is missing. And you wonder, well, what's wrong with Vav? Why would Vav have been left out? So here's a teaching. If you take out the verse Vav, then the middle, the opening line after the introduction, verse 2, the dead center is a lamed, and the closing added on verse is a pei. Aleph, lamed, pei is the Hebrew word aleph, which means learn. This psalm has something to teach. This is a wisdom psalm in terms of the core. I just mentioned that if you take out the vav, which has been taken out, then the middle verse of these 23 3 verses is verse 12. Go forth, children, listen to me. I will teach you Yirat Adonai alamedchem. Fear of God, I will teach you. Twice, that's the kind of teaching that we identify with Proverbs, where there are, in Proverbs, wisdom literature, aphorisms. The very beginning of Proverbs, chapter 1, verse 7. Yirat Adonai, the fear of God. Reshit da'at chachma is the beginning of intimate knowledge and wisdom. What's the beginning of the intimate knowledge of God? It's Yira Adonai. And so here too, our Psalter in verse 12 says, come children, listen to me. Fear of God I will teach you. So first, what is fear? What is Yira? Traditionally, Yira is translated as fear. There's a sense of trepidation before the powerful creator who judges us. Other more contemporary translators prefer words like respect God. I prefer the word have awe for God, because we're not as fear-based in our psychology of relationship as in an earlier time. But a core of teaching of Psalms is, what does it mean to honor God, to respect God, to have fear of God? And verses 13 to 15 are this Psalter's description. And what I also want to highlight is in more than 2/3 of the verses, the name of God appears, Yud He Vav He. It appears in 16 of the 23 verses. But remarkably, in verses 13, verses 14, verses 15, the name of God does not appear, because the teaching of what does it mean to have fear of God, what does it mean to respect God and have a relationship with God, is about how we treat each other. It's a remarkable teaching. It's what's somewhat unique to the Bible, namely that the God who created the world, and we saw this yesterday in Psalm 33, the God who created the world is actively involved and cares about our morality. It's the revolution of the Israelites. In the Mesopotamian myth of creation, in Gilgamesh, written about 1800 before the Common Era, in Akkadian. It's a long poem. There's a description of the flood. In that case, again, the ancient Near East, out of which Abraham comes, there are many gods, and these gods aren't getting along with each other. And they're upset with the people. That's why they will bring the flood. The people are supposed to provide food for the gods, but they're also very noisy, these people. And so the gods bring the flood. What is unique in the biblical description of creation is the image in that Noah story that what upsets God is a lack of morality, that the violence filled the world, and therefore God came to bring justice and to root out the evil. In Deuteronomy, in Moses' closing speech to the people, which is the whole book of Deuteronomy, we have a similar but direct expression. And now Israel, Ma Adonai Elohecha sho'el mi ma'amach. What is it that Yud He Vav He, your God, asks from you? Only this, Liyira et Adonai Elohecha, to have yira, this awe for the Lord your God, to go in God's ways, to love God, to serve God with all your heart and all your soul. And then that paragraph will continue. That God shows no favor, takes no bribe, upholds the cause of the fatherless and the widow, and befriends the stranger, providing that person with food and clothing. Verse 19, chapter 10, you too must befriend the stranger, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt. Which is to say, what does God want from you? God wants you to be ethical. We have it in one last place, and then we'll address our psalm more directly. But this is the introduction, because what's distinctive about this psalm is that there's a wisdom teaching in the very heart of it. And I want to give that a little larger context. There's the famous line, similarly, in the prophet Micah, chapter 6, verse 8. Higid lecha Adam atov, I will tell you, human, what is good. Uma Adonai doresh mimcha, what is it that the ever-present one seeks from you? And then three things. Ki im asot mishpat, to do justice. Va'avat chesed, to love kindness. V'hadsnea lechet im Elohecha, and to walk humbly with your God. And so in our psalm today, and we're going to return just at the very end to play the music by Baruch Hayat that goes with this teaching of verses 13, 14, and 15. That what is it? Again, I just love these verses as I've gotten, verse 12, go forth, lechu, banim, my children. Now that's in the mode of every student is your child, right? So this is the man, and the beginning of this psalm will be a world-weary experience of God's protection against enemies. And now, having given his credibility of being world experienced, now he's going to say, let me tell you what I've learned. I will teach you Yirat Adonai. I'm going to teach you what it means to have awe of God. Who is the person that desires life, who loves days to see goodness? Continues to kind of emphasize that the goal is to love life. Guard your tongue from evil, your lips from speaking deceit. Turn from evil and do good. Seek peace and pursue it. I'll focus a little bit more today on some of the rabbinic teachings on those verses in terms of what does it mean in our tradition to guard one's tongue. All right, so let me give you a little bit of an overview. I'm going to read it in English, point out a few of the key verses that are part of our prayers, and then with the time we have, we'll focus in on that ethical teaching that is distinctive in this psalm, and we'll listen a little bit, just like a minute, to a very large children's choir singing it, and then take some of your reactions. So the scholars, and again, I use this wonderful teacher, Benjamin Siegel, acknowledge that although it's an acrostic, there's no agreement as to how this psalm is divided. There's two major ways to do it. One is to say it's a two-part psalm. There's the introduction. I'm not counting the introduction, which is verse 1, and I'll tell you a little bit about that remarkable story of King David feigning madness. But the first block is verses 2 to 11, and that's basically his personal testimony. And then there's the teaching, which is verses 12 to 23. So that's kind of the simplest way to divide it. This is my life experience. God protected me. Here's what I learned. The other way it gets divided is verses 1 to 7, which is the theme that God cares for the downtrodden. He was downtrodden. Then it's verses 8 to 11, which is defining the fear of God, or giving context to the need for fear of God. Then it's verses 8 to 15. So verses 8 to 15, that's part 2. And then God is watching is verses 16 to 23. So as you can see, there's a number of different themes, and they're all woven. All right, let me read the psalm. I'll come back and I'll highlight some key verses that resonate. Here's one. I just can't help but give you one that's so familiar to most of us. You know, when we take the Torah out of the ark, we sing Shema Yisrael. We then sing Adonai. And then the person who's holding the Torah turns toward the ark and bows and says, before the processional then will begin, Gadlu Adonai iti unurama shemo yachdav. Join me declaring Adonai's greatness. Let us exalt God's name together. That's verse 4. So that's one resonant verse 4 that's part of whenever on Shabbat or holidays, actually every day, when on Monday, Thursday as well, whenever we take the Torah out of the ark, we chant verse 4. And seeing the context of which the verse is found will add significance for me the next time I hear it sung. All right, let me now read these 23 verses, point out a few little things. There's so much to say, but I really do want to focus on that ethical teaching. For David, when he disguised Tase before Avimelech, who drove them off, and he departed.
Why do you want to pull it up on your screen?
I do. So 1 second. All right, 1 second. Eric, are you there, Eric?
Yeah, I'm here.
Somehow, can you put it up?
I don't have it here in front of me. Is it not letting you put it up?
It's not going up, and I'm not sure why, because it's open. So 1 second. Thanks, Mimi, for reminding me. Okay, I got it now. All right. All right. I'm getting my confidence here. All right. Here's Psalm 34. I entitled this, Who is the Person That Desires Life? For David, when he disguised Tase before Avimelech, who drove him off and he departed. I bless Adonai at all times, continuously. God's praise is in my mouth. In Adonai does my spirit take pride. Let the humble hear and rejoice. Join me declaring Adonai's greatness. Let us exalt God's name together. I sought Adonai, and God answered me, and from all my terrors rescued me. Those who look to God become radiant, and their faces shall never be downcast. This poor person cried, and Adonai heard and delivered from all straits. The angel of Adonai encamps around those that are in awe of God and sets them free. Taste and see that Adonai is good. Happy is the person that shelters in God. Evoke awe for Adonai, you holy ones of God, for there is no lack for those who have awe of God. Young lions are wretched and hunger, but seekers of Adonai will not lack any good thing. Go forth, children, listen to me. I will teach you the awe of Adonai. Who is the person that desires life, who loves days to see goodness? Guard your tongue from evil and your lips from speaking deceit. Turn from evil and do good. Seek peace and pursue it. Eyes of Adonai are toward the righteous, and God's eyes are open to their cry. God's ears are open to their cry. The face of Adonai is against evildoers, to cut off from the earth their memory. They cried, and Adonai heard, and from all their straits delivered them. Close is Adonai to the brokenhearted, and crushed in spirit are delivered. Many are the evils upon the righteous, but Adonai will rescue them from all of these. Guards all such a person's bones, not one of them will be broken. Evil will kill the wicked, and they that hate the righteous will bear guilt. Adonai redeems the soul of God's servants, and none will bear guilt who shelter in God. I will add that this closing line, God redeems the soul, is very similar to that other acrostic psalm, Psalm 25, where you may remember it also ended with this word podeh. There it was podeh Elohim et Yisrael mikol tzorotav, another name for God. God will redeem Israel from all of its straits, from all of its tsuris. And so here we also have this going, once the alphabet has ended with the Tuf in verse 22, the added on pay, once again spelling out with the opening, middle, and closing. Here, unlike Psalm 25, Aleph, learn, a wisdom psalm. I'm going now backwards to say this is a psalm verse 19 is a very important another line. Close is Adonai to the brokenhearted, and the crushed in spirit are delivered. Rabbi Nachman of Bratslav, the great grandson of the Baal Shem Tov, the founder of Chassidut, who Elie Wiesel called the first modern writer. Many of the parables of Rabbi Nachman would one particularly would find its way into Kafka later. Bottom line, Rabbi Nachman would say there is nothing more whole than a broken heart. And this line will often get cited, that close as Adonai or near as Adonai to lenishberei lev, to the brokenhearted, ve'etakei ruach, and to the crushed in spirit are delivered. And so that's a very resonant line in Jewish teaching. And now for the introduction, verse 1. Now David, and this is to be found in the book of Samuel, chapter 21. It's a juicy story. Let me just give you a little bit of it. David is on the run from King Saul. And so it begins with verse 11. That day, David continued on his flight from Saul, and he came to King Achish of Gath, which is in the south. The courtiers of Achish said to him, "Why, that's David, king of the land. That's the one of whom they sing as they dance. Saul has slain his thousands, David his tens of thousands." These words worried David, and he became very much afraid of King Achish of Gath. So he concealed his good sense. Here it's the same words, vai shano et tam'o, translated in the JPS as he concealed his good sense from them. He feigned madness, which is here. He feigned madness for their benefit. He scratched marks on the doors of the gate and let his saliva run down his beard. And Achish said to his courtiers, Ish mishtagea, he's a meshuga. Mishtagea, he's a meshuga. You see, the man is crazy. Why bring him to me? Do I lack meshugaim? Do I lack crazy people that you have brought this fellow to rave for me? Should this fellow enter my house? And so King David is saved by his ability to feign madness in this case. And that's the opening for David hold on one second. for David. And here's a play on words. Shanato et ta'amo, in his changing of his taste, when he disguised his taste. So translators will sometimes translate it as when he feigned madness, but that's not literal. Some will say when he changed his behavior. Ta'am can mean taste, can be the reasoning of a person, also in Hebrew. But here's why it's important. Look at verse 9. Let me scroll up. Ta'amu, it's the same word as in verse 1 for he changed his taste. Here it's ta'amu ur'u ki tov Adonai. Taste and see that Adonai is good. Ashrei hagever, happy is the person that shelters in God. And so the opening has the same root, ta'amu, and here too, some people will translate it as reason and see, but I like the central nature of taste and see, and therefore in the opening, I translate it as when he disguised his taste, meaning he acted crazy, his taste of what it means to be a normal person. So we don't know, of course, if this was added, verse 1, the introduction, to be a context for a psalm about being saved, or potentially could have been King David extolling his rescue. And rescue is constantly repeated throughout this. Taste and see that Adonai is good. Happy is the person that shelters in God. And I also want to emphasize this word ashrei, happy. It's a reoccurring word, and it go back to the very first psalm we studied together because it's the first word of Psalms. The goal of a religious life is inner calm and contentment. Ashrei. Yesterday we had Ashrei ha'am, happy is the people. Here is happy is the gever. Gever is also the mighty. A gibor is a hero, a mighty person, a warrior. Happy is the person who shelters in God. So now I've already used up all my time with you, and I'm always self-conscious not to go too much into overtime, but I just want to do a few teachings around 13 to 15. Here too, I want to emphasize that the implication of verse 13 is that it is God who desires life. We say, Zachrenu b'chayim melech chafetz b'chayim. We say that between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Remember us to life, we say to God. Melech chafetz b'chayim, the God who wants life, who desires our life. So that verse 13 defines the audience. If you desire life, and the important teacher, Samson Raphael Hirsch of Frankfurt, Germany of the 19th century, he emphasizes that it's not mihaish hechafetz b'chayim. It's not the person who has a desire in the life. It's not the person who's looking to taste, if you will, the pleasures of life as such. It's not the central goal. And therefore it's hechafetz chayim, who desires life. The goal is not in life, it's life as the focus. Life is the gift itself, who loves to see days of tov, of goodness. And so clearly the punchline of verses 14 to 16 is three things. It's first what you shouldn't do. Right? You need not to speak. You guard your lips. Guard your lips. And that's not enough. It's not enough to be, if you will, passive, not to speak. That's verse 14. You got to turn from evil. That's already an act, and do good. And then seek peace and pursue it is the good. Maybe that should be a colon. And that's what you need to do. You not only need to actively seek peace, you need to pursue it. And that's also a phrase taken from Psalms to describe Aaron in the teaching of the sages, 112, where Hillel, the great teacher of the first century, says, "Be like Aaron, Moses' brother, Ohev Shalom v'rodev Shalom." He loved peace, he pursued peace. And the rabbis will emphasize the need to be engaged. Back to our responsibilities. It starts with knowing the power of the tongue and holding our tongue. That's the beginning of wisdom for all of us. That's the downfall of Moses in the Bible, his failing in that moment not to guard his tongue and his arm. But it's more than that, to live a life of ashrei, of inner wholeness and contentment. It's also to turn from evil actively, to distance yourself from it, and to seek peace and pursue it. Bakeh shalom v'radfehu. Only with taking action in life are you fulfilling God's expectations of you as the caring creator. Only is there yirat Adonai, awe of God, by what we don't do, but even more by what we do. Loving peace, pursuing peace. Well, we're out of time. I had a lot of rabbinic homilies about that, but we know a lot about guarding our tongue. That was a good opportunity to reflect on the psalm. I asked Eric now to play just 1 minute, only 1 minute of this choir singing verses 13 to 15 to give you a taste for this beautiful song by Baruch Hayat. And then I'll open it up for 5 or 10 minutes of questions or thoughts. Okay, Eric. So on the mailing today for this presentation, there's the link to hear that in its entirety. But I wanted to hear you. So let's have 5 minutes or so for any thoughts, questions, or reactions to Psalm 34. Rabbi Podwal. We gotta unmute you. All righty. Eric, can you help unmute?
Oh, I said, okay. I think beautiful.
I got you. Okay, good.
Beautiful presentation. And of course, everybody loves that melody. It's just the greatest, Mi'a'ish. I think the last 4 verses are talking about physical saving. Save me from physical attack. My bones are not broken. You protect me. And then when it gets to the last verse, Podadanai nefesh avadav, it's not, of course, you may know my judgment. Nefesh, maybe it means soul later on. But I think if we examine, I can't prove it. I think overwhelmingly when you have the word nefesh in the Tanakh, in the Bible, more often than not, it's physical being. Yeah. The nefesh is the physical, your physical life. And so it's redeemed my being, my life, really. Otherwise, I mean, that's what fits, and it even fits here with the other last four verses, that nefesh is, mayim ad nafesh. The water comes up to where, if it comes up to your mouth, your physical being, not your soul is in trouble, but your physical body's in trouble.
So I want to thank you for that, and I will make the correction in the following way. You are right, Rabbi Podwell, for me, in that nefesh is spirit or life. Neshama is more the word used for soul. And I probably spend half my time, meaning an hour and a half to at least, translating these Psalms. And every word matters. It matters in terms of the repetition of words. And here we go. I so thank you, Rabbi Podwell. And I want to emphasize the larger part that Rabbi Podwell was making, and that is the closing verses deal with the quality of being saved physically, in terms of not having one's bones broken in verse 21, culminating in not being killed. So literally, Adonai redeems the spirit of God's servants. Though I will add one more piece, and that's to fill out the theme and the message. None will bear guilt who share in God. So it's not only being saved physically, it's being redeemed spiritually, that one will be whole as a person before God. So I will make that change because it's the right change. Adonai redeems the spirit, which means redeems the life of. But again, it's more broad than just the physical person. So thank you. Are there any other comments or questions about this psalm? I don't see all the hands, so if I don't see any hands, other hands today. So let me say a few things in closing. Is that right? Nobody has a hand? That's fine.
There's some chats, Rabbi.
Say that again?
There's a couple chats, I think.
Oh, there were chats?
Ahuva wrote.
Okay, let me look now. I'm going to do some of these chats out loud, and then I'm going to pull it together. Thank you, first, Barry, for your kind words. And to Ahuva, she says in verse 1 that the phrase Bishanato et ta'amo, which I translate as when he disguised taste. And ta'amo, Ahuva says, can be typical behavior. And that's right. I also acknowledge that ta'am can be physical taste, but it can also be reasoning, and it can also be behavior, which again is the ambiguity of the Hebrew. And Ahuva adds for me that that's how Rashi understands it. So thank you very much, Ahuva. And Lindy, who I know likes to dance, adds that the music we heard also has a dance to it. Thanks, Chandra, for your kind words. And Ahuva notes in regard to the closing comment of Rabbi Podwell that the word nefesh can also be throat, which is identified with breath, because nefesh, ruach, neshama are all words for soul and all identified with breath, and nefesh specifically is identified with throat, and that's of course the source of breath itself. So thank you for all those comments. Looking forward, no class tomorrow as I have a bat mitzvah in the synagogue, but Psalm 35 will pick up on Tuesday. I, in my letter, acknowledged my identification with Elie Wiesel and this psalm. Interestingly, the word Holocaust is coined by Elie Wiesel in describing what we now call the Holocaust. He was the first to call it that. The word Holocaust means a burnt offering. And in Hebrew, we have this tradition of Kiddushat Hashem, sanctification before God. He wanted to signify that all the people that had died were sanctified before God. an offering of sorts. So he called those events the Holocaust. In Hebrew, it's called instead Shoah, which means devastation. And Psalm 35, Tuesday, is a psalm describing false, dangerous friends that he was kind to, but were duplicitous against him. And this word Shoah appears more than once. And I want to focus on that with you. It's a powerful psalm of being deceived by those who you treated well. That's Tuesday. Thank you for making my day, each of you for joining today. Have a good day. Take the melody of Psalm 34 forward with you. Be
How
well.
about
Are we
Kaddish?
doing Kaddish?
Oh, Kaddish. Thank you, Eric. I need you. Anybody who would like to conclude with Kaddish, we still have enough people to join together honoring our loved ones.
Person.
Yitkadal v'yitkadal shemei rabbah
Amen.
v'yalma dibra kirutei v'yamlich malchutei v'chayecho v'yamecho v'yei Yisrael ba'ala u'bizman karim v'yimru amen.
Amen.
Yehi
Shmei Rabba Bamivara
Amen.
Shalom Almighty
Yalome
Yitzbarach Yitzabah V'yitloar V'yitramam V'yitnaseh V'yitadar V'yitaleh V'yitala Shemei Elah Kol Shirata Tushbachata V'nechamata Run V'imru Amen.
Amen.
Yehei
Yehesh
Abba
Him
Chayim
V'chayol Yisrael Yimiru Amen.
Osei Shalom
Shalom Dimmerma
Huyas
Shalom
Aleinu Kol Yoshvei Tevel Vimru Amen.
Amen.
Thanks again.
Yes,
Have a good day.
thank you.
Be well.